Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Steven Goes to the Movies. It feels like forever since I did one. We went and saw all the new movies that like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then there's just nothing else to catch up on that came out. But anyways, today I went and saw an early showing, an early preview of the Spider-Man Enter the Spiderverse movie, and I gotta say, 2 thumbs up, absolutely. This movie was so funny. The writing was so clever and on point, and they hit every beat perfectly. I even would almost criticize them because there was one line that I missed, because we were all laughing still at the last line, and I wasn't sure what was said, and I was like, oh man, if only we weren't laughing, you know? The audience was it was pretty much sold out, except for a couple seats in the first row. I would say easily the best Sony produced Spider-Man movie. I don't include Spider-Man Homecoming in that, since that was had a lot more Marvel in there, as far as I know. So this is definitely the best Spider-Man movie. I'll start off right off the bat. They completely acknowledge the history. The Spider-Man that we're introduced to in the movie does a whole little like, here's my backstory. But they do it in a way where they're like, we know you've seen this before, and they go through the whole thing where he goes, I saved some people, I met a girl, I saved some more people, and then he was like, and I also did this, and it was the scene from Spider-Man 3 where Tobey Maguire had venom in him, was infected, and he was dancing down the street. That was really funny. It was not the same as in the movie because they had to keep the costume on. I'm sure because if they had tried to make him look like Tobey Maguire, they would have had to pay him for his likeness. But it was a good scene. It set the tone right off the bat. Everyone was laughing. Every Spider-Man that they introduced into the movie, they did that again, where they would, here's my backstory, and they kept speeding it up each time because they know they've already done that. But Spider Pig, or Spider Pork, whatever his name is, was funny. I really, everyone in the theater really loved Spider-Man Noir. And I don't know, I have to look into if all these different Spider-Mans are actual things, like they actually there's comic book series out there, but if there are, I am absolutely buying Spider-Man Noir, and so I can read through it, because that is a really cool character. I got bit in the 30s, and my favorite activity is punching Nazis. And just every line of his was just so good. It's like, sometimes I let a match burn all the way down to the bottom just so I can feel something. So I guess I'll get into some spoilers. Let me just say, I completely recommend this movie to everybody. I mean, you know, it probably helps to know a little bit about Spider-Man, but it's not a requirement, because again, like I said, they go through the backstories. If you've ever seen any of the other Spider-Mans, then you'll enjoy this movie. But yeah, so let's go into the story. It's set around this kid, last name Morales. You know, he's just a kid in the Bronx. He grew up in Brooklyn. And you know, he's just an average kid. He likes to do graffiti art. He's got a cool uncle. You know, his dad's a cop, his mom's a nurse, and they've pushed him into this like preppy school because he's a smart kid and all that kind of stuff. Morales is with his uncle, and he's, you know, he's tagging like a subway terminal, an unused, like an abandoned subway terminal, and he's just doing that, and then a spider lands on his hand and bites him, and again, another laugh in the movie. It bites him, and it looks all dramatic because it shows like how like the venom's going into the body and the cells are changing, and then he just like looks at it and goes, what? And then like smacks it and just kills the spider, and everyone just started laughing because we expected some kind of big dramatic thing there. So anyways, so he gets bit, he goes to sleep, he wakes up the next morning, and now he's like freaking out. He doesn't know what's going on. His hands are sticking to things, and you know, and there's just some funny scenes that ensue. And his roommate, because this prep school, you sleep there during the week, his roommate is a big Spider-Man fan, because everyone loves Spider-Man in the universe. He's a big hero. He's always saving people. There's action figures and comic books and all that stuff. And so he, when he's like freaking out and his hands are sticking to everything, he ends up seeing one of the comic books, and it's basically retelling his whole thing, where it's like, he's like, why is my hand sticking to stuff? And he goes, oh no, am I a Spider-Man? And he doesn't want to be, because we're already introduced to the fact that his dad doesn't like Spider-Man. He doesn't hate him, but he doesn't like him because, you know, he's like, he goes out once a day and he saves some people and everybody praises him, but here I am, you know, here we are, the police, putting our lives on the line with no mask, and nobody praises us this way. So he goes back to the subway terminal where he got bit, because he realized it must have been the spider when it bit him, and he finds that what it actually the rest of the path that it leads to is Kingpin's got a super collider that he's built, that he's been running tests on, which then explains how the spider ended up in the universe, and found its way onto Miles's hand and into biting him. So he gets there, and he's watching as Spider-Man is fighting with Green Goblin. His head, he ended up getting like sucked in, like his head got sucked into this, like the multiverse thing, as it was like, you know, going crazy, the collider. And then another villain who they never really introduce, at least this was the kind of the character where I at first was like, maybe you need to know a lot more about Spider-Man to be into this movie, because they're introducing this character and I don't know him. This other character starts fighting with Spider-Man, with Peter Parker, and he's just watching, and then he starts falling. Peter Parker finds him, and then he like basically inspires him to be like, "Oh, you're like me," and he's like, "I don't want to be." And he's like, "No, well, you don't have a choice, kid, and you know, I'm gonna teach you. You know, I'll be your mentor," and blah blah blah. So, double spoiler alert: the main universe's Peter Parker dies. That's the one who we knew as Tobey Maguire's character, who had done the dancing in number 3 and all that other stuff. And Miles is watching this from a distance, and he makes a noise, and so then this mysterious the mysterious villain character is now chasing him, and he manages just barely to get away after an extended chase scene. And there's a very touching moment that got me kind of misty. You know, I didn't start crying or anything, but I was close, where the entire city is getting the notification that Spider-Man has died, and his real name was Peter Parker, and all this. And then Mary Jane goes on the news, and it's like a whole she does like a conference thing where she's like talking about him and how she's trying to inspire the people that you know, Peter only put the mask on because he felt it was right, you know, and every one of you can be just like that and be him, and you know, the whole thing. And I thought that was a super touching, just like imagining a world where everyone is like, you know, loves this character because of the good deeds he does, and then to find out he's gone at only 26 years old, like that whole thing, it was like, wow. And then this is when we first get introduced to the other dimensionally figures, because now we get to the scene, which this was the scene that was at the end of Venom. For anyone that stuck around through the credits of Venom, they saw an extended look at the Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse. And I'll be honest, when I saw this scene at the end of Venom, I was pretty heavily against the movie. I thought that it had an awkward humor that didn't make any sense. But now seeing the scene in context of how they've established the world, it was a great scene. And so then now we learn about Peter Parker. This was a funny one when they did the whole here's my backstory, because they literally took the same words, the same verbiage from the beginning of the movie when the Peter Parker that died did his monologuing. It's the exact same words, but with a different inflection in in it, that you realize this Peter Parker is a depressed person, because, like, you know, he messed up his marriage with Mary Jane, and he goes out and he fights, but he doesn't care, and he's getting fat off just eating pizza all day, you know, and that whole thing. And then that kind of establishes this character's arc of going from, like, not caring anymore to, you know, at the end of the movie now he's learned what it means to be a hero again, essentially. There were also two very nicely done Stan Lee moments. You know, it was very clear that he was a part of the movie, because there was the scene where Miles goes and buys the Spider-Man costume. The shopkeeper, when he turns around to face Miles, turns out it is Stan Lee, and he does a whole little, and he got a couple lines in there. He goes, you know, him and I were you know, we were friends, and this like a whole thing, and everyone in the audience sighed. I feel like they could have ended that scene a little bit better, because it was obviously done before he died, Stan Lee. But, you know, there's a little bit of humor at the end of it where Miles asks him, if it doesn't fit, can I return it? And he goes, it always fits, sooner or later. And if it had ended there, it would have been, oh, that's touching. But then the camera pans over, and what we actually see is a sign that says no returns or exchanges allowed, and then Stan Lee is still there with, like, a creepy smile of, like, you know, so what could have been like this touching moment of him inspiring the hero, turns out he's just a sleazebag store owner. And then during the credits, they did a thank you to Stan Lee, and they did, like, one of his quotes about how anyone who chooses to help others is a true superhero and all that. And that was really great. But pro tip, stay to the end of the credits. I know we're all getting used to doing that when it comes to comic book movies, but this one had, not only was most of the credits very visually stunning and just fun, but the post-credit scene was hilarious and definitely worth sticking around for. But, you know, I don't want to go any further with the story. I want you to go see it and enjoy it for yourself. So thank you again. Don't forget to comment and like and subscribe. Tell me your thoughts on this movie or other movies. Was I wrong to say this was the best Spider-Man movie Sony has made? Maybe. You tell me. I don't think I'm wrong, especially about one of those amazing Spider-Man movies that came out in the last couple of years. Just saying. But anyways, have a wonderful night, and I hope to see you again soon.